Ich brauche jetzt den Trost der Religion und dazu kommt unser nächster Redner, nämlich Professor Bron von der Universität Florida. Er lehrt und forscht dort zum Thema Religion und Natur. Taylor hat den Ausdruck Dark Green Religion oder auch Dark Green Spirituality geprägt und er ist so etwas wie der Bote einer neuen Ökoreligion, würde ich mal sagen. Er spricht jetzt zum Thema Spiritualität nach Darwin.
Es freut mich vielmals hier zu sein in diesem großen Raum, aber es tut mir leid, dass mein Deutsch so schlecht ist, dass ich muss auf Englisch präsentieren. So some of our previous speakers were looking at non-human organisms. I'm going to look at human organisms. In 1990, the Voyager satellite took a picture of the Earth from the which inspired the title of Carl Sagan's 1994 book titled A Pale Blue Dot. In this book, Sagan contended that science has surpassed religion in delivering awe. A religion that stressed the magnificence of the universe as revealed by modern science might be able to draw forth reserves of reverence and awe hardly tapped by conventional faiths, he argued. Sooner or later, such religion will emerge. Tonight, I will argue that if we do not assume that a religion must involve supernatural beliefs, just such a religion is indeed emerging today. In a recent book, I called it Dark Green Religion. I contended that no one has been more important to its emergence and rapid spread than Charles Darwin. And in this book, I provided evidence that such spirituality is spreading with surprising alacrity and exercising increasing global influence. Before characterizing such spirituality, I should say a few words about the difficult word religion. The early roots of the word has to do with being bound to, connected, or tied to something greater than oneself, or to whatever one considers ultimately true, meaningful, or sacred. The term sacred generally involves places, times, and experiences of transcendent or transformative or meaning-filled experiences, or also of physical or spiritual healing power. I follow what some scholars call the family resemblances approach to the study of religion, which involves analyzing the religion-resembling traits and functions of social phenomena without worrying about where the boundary of religion lies. Given the constraints of time tonight, I must quickly summarize the characteristics that are most common in what I eventually termed dark green religion. These involve perceptions and beliefs that nature is itself sacred. Its value is not only indirect, by virtue of having been divinely created. All living things have intrinsic value and deserve respect, if not also reverence. Other terms for such values in contemporary philosophy are deep ecology or biocentric ethics. All life forms share a common ancestor and thus are kin. They are literally related. Also typical is an ecology-based understanding that all life is interconnected and mutually dependent, and these beliefs are entangled with, are woven in with deep feelings of belonging and connection to nature and a corresponding humility about the human place in the world. These, in turn, are often rooted in experiences of awe and wonder at the terror and beauties of the biosphere and universe. And often entangled as well are perceptions that death is not to be feared, but to be accepted as the necessary wellspring for all new life. In my book, I contended as well that diverse expressions of dark green nature spirituality can generally be found in animistic and Gaian forms. And they can be conventionally religious, seeing the divinity or divinities in or giving rise to nature, or they can be entirely naturalistic, where there are no non-material divine beings or forces involved. As these sorts of spiritualities are being expressed and promoted, in a host of ways. In fiction and nonfiction books, theatrical and documentary films, photography, painting, sculpture, and other forms of art, at festivals and during political protests, at theme parks, and quite often at museums, in zoos, and at aquariums. I contend that naturalistic nature spiritualities have growing cultural traction in no small measure because they they fit with contemporary evolutionary understandings which disrupt long-standing religious cosmogonies, or stories about how the world came to be the way it is, and offer a compelling alternative meaning system, as Darwin himself eloquently wrote in the final passages of On the Origin of Species. I'll read this since I'm not sure everybody in the back can see it. It's interesting to contemplate an entangled bank clothed with many plants of many kinds, with birds singing on the bushes, with various insects flitting about, and with worms crawling through the damp earth, and to reflect that these elaborately constructed forms have all been produced by the laws surrounding us. That Darwin is offering a meaning system is especially clear in his concluding words when he wrote, "When we contemplate the diversity of life on Earth, we come to understand that despite the long struggle for existence and the suffering that this involves, there is grandeur in this view of life, that from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved." Darwin also understood that the evolutionary story properly leads to felt kinship and a biocentric ethics. In this passage, for example, we can see that Darwin understood that a kinship ethic can be deduced first through reflection on our common ancestor and a concomitant or corresponding understanding that all life is quite literally related. And second, through an ethic that can come through our capacity for empathy and awareness that we and other animals suffer and face similar challenges. Darwin's thought has been stunningly influential, and nowhere is this clearer than in the 20th century scientist-philosopher Alda Leopold's work in a Sand County Almanac. Leopold wrote about how Darwin showed that all organisms share the same struggle for existence, and that this knowledge should have given us a sense of kinship with our fellow creatures, a wish to live and let live, a sense of wonder over the magnitude and duration of the biotic enterprise. For many, it has done just that. And although I can't detail the evidence regarding Darwin's contribution to a dark green worldview revolution, I can provide some evidence that such understandings are promoted at a host of natural history museums and aquariums around the world, including the Shrine to Darwin and the Evolutionary Story in London, as well as at the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. There, its most prominent exhibit introduced the discipline of anthropology by first explaining the age of the Earth and then the evolutionary process. It then had a panel with these words: "Thus, anthropology, through the study of fossil remains and modern primates, can trace the evolutionary relationships, presenting a mirror that reminds us that we are a part of the history of the world and the animal kingdom, and not, as we used to believe, that we were created to have nature at our service." Underscoring the connection between human beings and the rest of the animal kingdom was a display of Australopithecus afarensis, whom scientists consider an early human. Here and elsewhere, the museum curators articulated the view that humans are animals and that all organisms share a common ancestor. This was the basis as well for the exhibit's explicit criticism of anthropocentric or human-centered arrogance and the false earlier view that nature was created only for us. Similar themes are found at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, which clearly stresses evolutionary continuity and kinship, while overviewing the evolutionary sciences, asking visitors to take a walk through biological time, thus dethroning humanity from the pinnacle of some great chain of being, and instead, by showing the continuity between humans and other organisms, including through DNA analysis, revealing chimpanzees as our closest biological cousins, who share 98.8% of the same DNA. All of this is traced back to the kind of analysis of homologies that were central to Darwin's recognition of the resemblances among diverse species. As it says here in this display, all living things, from people to butterflies to mushrooms, are related to one another. Even ones that look very different share many characteristics, which they have inherited from a common ancestor. This is exemplified by the display's homologies, as for example here, where humans, chimpanzees, and Goliath frogs are shown to have similar limbs, all of which evolved from the same four-legged ancestors. You can find similar kinds of analysis of homologies in this museum. In a complementary way, the Hall of Biodiversity celebrates the diversity of life on Earth while urging action to prevent anthropogenic species extinctions, not unlike messages you can receive right here in this museum. The exhibit is replete with evocative quotations from leading scientific proponents of green spirituality, including Henry David Thoreau, Rachel Carson, Gary Snyder, and Leopold himself. In South Africa, the Sterkfontein Caves, where some of the most important Australopithecine fossils were found, have been declared the cradle of humankind and a World Heritage Site. Here are some images of the caves as they appear today to tourists who descend into them. At the adjacent Sterkfontein Museum, again, we find timelines showing humans as latecomers to the cosmological as well as the biological story. People are urged to discover their true selves, which means their animal selves, and deep relationships with all other human beings. The curators explain how our ancestors developed into the genus Homo and eventually emerged as modern humans some 200,000 years ago in Africa. Famous scientists again are quoted, including Carl Sagan, noting that the scientific method encourages nothing less than heresy. And to the right of this panel, the curators quoted Charles Darwin's statement about there being grandeur to an evolutionary understanding of Earth's stunning biodiversity. Nearby, there's another Cradle of Humanity exhibition called Meroping, which presents similar themes about the significance of Africa as the cradle of humankind, involving more walk-through timelines, reducing human self-importance, mixing pride for the African continent with a humanism grounded in an evolutionary understanding. As it says here, all of humanity shares an African heritage, and we are one diverse species, a theme that was repeated inside in very big letters, just to make sure nobody missed the point. And that we are related to all life as well was stressed, and visitors were urged to protect this fragile planet. Many of the world's aquariums are also clearly designed to evoke and promote deep feelings of belonging and connection with marine ecosystems, even a perception that they are sacred places, worthy of reverent care. At the Two Oceans Aquarium in Cape Town, South Africa, you see right there the notion that the ocean is sacred. There's nothing subtle about it. This is the first thing you see when you enter the museum, which was connected to an effort to end whaling. And of course, the entire aquarium was constructed to shape perception, to help people experience the wonder, if not also the sacredness of nature. Such marine spirituality is also expressed at the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California, if more subtly. The welcome itself reflects a spirituality and ethics of connection, urges you to feel your connections to these systems. The first major wing of the aquarium included this aphorism from the nature writer Terry Tempest Williams. I don't know if anybody can read that, but wildness reminds us what it means to be human, what we are connected to rather than what we are separate from. Or Lauren Isley, there's magic. If there's magic on this planet, it is contained in water. Or the poet Robinson Jeffords, the tides are in our veins. Or Jacques Cousteau, the sea, once it casts its spell, holds one in its net of wonders forever. The exhibits were obviously constructed to re-enchant our perception of the oceans. Here, a quote from Henry David Thoreau, a famous one about wildness preserving the world, and then display after display, including a jellyfish exhibit in which mystical music was mixed with very, very subtle lighting to illuminate these organisms, not unlike, I think, the shrine you have over here to an ancient fossil. It's not only biological evolution that is a tributary to scientific nature spiritualities, though. So is cosmology, beginning with Copernicus's decentering of the Earth as the center of the solar system. Now, of course, many have noted the influence of the image of the whole Earth from space, first made popular in this countercultural publication in 1968. Your House of World Cultures had an exhibit on this a couple years ago. Reinforced by subsequent images taken by Apollo astronauts, which the atmospheric scientist James Lovelock recalled as a revelation to him, helping him to realize that the Earth is a living planet. Lovelock, of course, went on to theorize the Earth functions like a self-regulating organism, naming his theory after Gaia, the Greek goddess of the Earth. He thus began a process in which Gaian spirituality is now commonly used to express the notion that the Earth is an interdependent living being that needs our respect and care. Returning briefly to New York City, adjacent to the Natural History Museum is the Hayden Planetarium. Today, its director is Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is a protege of Carl Sagan. Sagan became famous when he narrated a public television series called Cosmos in the 1970s. Following in his footsteps, Tyson hosted his own version recently on a number of prominent television channels. And like Sagan, he expresses awe and wonder at the mysteries of the universe and depicts this unfolding story as a sacred one. This consecrated universe story is also provided in the planetarium, which includes the Hall of the Universe, the Big Bang Theater, shown here from the inside, and on the adjacent cosmic pathway, in which visitors are taken on another pilgrimage-like walk through cosmological time that shows what latecomers humans are to the story of the universe. And again, by dethroning humanity from the center of the story, the exhibition promotes humility about the human place in it. Tyson is now nearly as famous as was Sagan, his mentor, and he speaks reverently of him, often quoting from the final words of A Pale Blue Dot, referring to it as if it were scripture, as the Book of Carl. Sagan's words are evocative in a way reminiscent of the final words in Darwin's most famous book, which is why Tyson often repeats them, and I abbreviate them here. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives there. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In all of this vastness, there's no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. And yet, the Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, and of course then also to Tyson, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. I'd like to conclude with a couple clips of music videos made by a creative young man in Seattle, California, using a technology known as auto-tune, in which he takes the voices of people and turns them into song. The first features Sagan himself and many others who have found through science our deep connections one with another in this little place in space. So we'll hope that technology will cooperate.
We're all connected to each other biologically, to the Earth chemically, to the rest of the universe atomically.
I think nature's imagination is so much greater than man's. He's never gonna let us relax.
We live in an in-between universe where things change all right, but according to patterns, rules, or as we call them, laws of nature.
I'm this guy standing on a planet. Really, I'm just a speck. I'm just a speck compared with a star. The planet is just another speck.
So it's only scientists like these guys that can get so excited about just being a speck on a speck of a planet. But you can see Bill Nye, the science guy, is really worked up about it. But it gives you an idea of how this kind of ecological metaphysics of interconnection is so prevalent in the kinds of spiritualities I'm talking about. Now, this last clip includes the great documentarian David Attenborough and also the great anthropologist Jane Goodall, as well as a little bit more from Carl Sagan.
Let's take a trip to examine this common basis of life, a voyage to investigate the molecular machinery at the heart of life on Earth.
All life is related, and it enables us to construct with confidence the complex tree that represents the history of life. Our planet, the Earth, is, as far as we know, unique in the universe. It contains life. Here, plants and animals proliferate in such numbers that we still have not even named all the different species. Darwin's great insight revolutionized the way in which we see the world. We now understand why there are so many different species.
Every cell is a triumph of natural selection, and we're made of trillions of cells. Within us is a little universe. Those are some of the things that molecules do. Given 4 billion years of evolution, we are, each of us, a multitude.
Now, how did the molecules of life arise?
It began in the sea some 3,000 million years ago. Complex chemical molecules began to clump together.
These were the seeds from which the tree of life developed. They were able to split, replicating themselves as bacteria do.
The secrets of evolution are time and death. There's an unbroken thread that stretches from those first cells to us. The secrets of evolution are time and death. There's an unbroken thread that stretches from those first cells to us.
There isn't a sharp line dividing humans from the rest of the animal kingdom. It's a very wuzzy line. It's a very wuzzy line. It's getting wuzzier all the time. We find animals doing things that we, in our arrogance, used to think was just human. It's a very wuzzy line. It's getting wuzzier all the time.
Our planet, the Earth, is, as far as we know, unique in the universe. It contains life. Its continued survival now rests in our hands.
So as you can see, these luminaries of contemporary environmentalism draw directly on Darwin's evolutionary and relational understandings to stress our ethical obligations and our deep connections with all life. And I think that these sorts of ideas, this sort of worldview transformation is proceeding around the world really when you think that it's only been incubating for a little more than 150 years in a tremendously rapid and culturally powerful way. And it's going to be very interesting to watch how it goes from here. But there's all sorts of people in all different sorts of life, walks of life, that that have affinity with this sort of spirituality and are expressing and promoting it in their own ways. Basically, you could return to that passage by Darwin himself. There's grandeur in this view of life that I'm trying to give you a little feel for is breaking out culturally around the world. And indeed, in social networks today, I even got Happy Darwin Day from a friend quoting that very passage. So anyway, thank you for your patience tonight and for coming out. I'm looking forward to the conversation.